Good. Thank you so much for the introduction. We usually give this presentation to other attorneys or businessmen or salespeople that are looking to try to improve their negotiation skills or improve their sales. That being said, the topic that I'm going to be discussing will apply to where you are in your life, because after all, we are always negotiating, right? So you can be retired. It does not matter. You're at some point going to be negotiating whether you want to buy a product or a service, or whether you're negotiating with your loved ones, whether it's a spouse or children. So the concepts and the topic that I'm talking about, I'm very confident you can extract whatever nuggets you find and apply them into your own life immediately. So the formula that I'm going to be talking about today, I came up with a formula called E = MC to the fifth. Okay, and it's a distinct formula for negotiation excellence. That's the topic that I'm speaking about today. And you might recognize that formula sounds somewhat similar to Einstein's theory of relativity, which was E = MC squared. And this formula that I'm talking about today has nothing to do with physics, obviously, but it is something that I thought is easy to remember, just the way Einstein's formula was very easy for me to remember when I first heard that in high school. And so when I was working on concepts over the years, I did have a lot of C's and I did have an E, and all of a sudden I had an M, and it was like, hey, I've got the same letters as that formula. So that's where it comes from. And I want to talk about the first letter of that formula, which stands for excellence, okay? Because when we're talking about negotiating, what I'm really striving for is to get consistent, excellent negotiation results, right? It's all about getting consistent results and consistent, excellent results. It's not about getting a good result once in a while, because anybody can show up sometimes for a negotiation and get a great result. You know, that blind squirrel finds a nut, right? Every once in a while. So it's about consistency. And in order to get consistent at a high level, this formula really needs to be adhered to. And so that's the goal of the formula, is excellence. And what is excellence? Excellence is nothing more than habits, right? We're all creatures of habits. We're all a function of our habits. So how do we develop this habit? You know, what is it about habits that I want you to sort of take away? There's a great book on habits called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I highly recommend that book if you haven't read it already. And, you know, it's way beyond the scope of this presentation, but I just want to extract out a couple of salient points from that book about habit making. Because most of us, if we try to do something and want to improve or eliminate a bad habit, maybe, or develop a good habit, we're focusing on the wrong things. We're focusing either on the outcome or the process, okay? So what do I mean by that? Let's say we had a goal of losing weight. Let's say we needed to lose 20 pounds, okay? We could focus on the outcome, which would be the actual 20 pounds. We got to keep doing things until we get that 20 pounds off, and we're checking the scale all the time. Or we could focus on the process. Maybe it's this late night eating that is the cause of putting on this extra weight. And therefore, we want to focus on stopping that late night eating. So that's either focusing on the process or the outcome. But the studies and the research that really were brought to bear in this book very nicely is that does not work for the long haul. You can get short-term results with that, and you might be able to drop 20 pounds and you might be able to stop eating for a while late at night. But for the long haul, you're not going to establish really good habits or eliminate really bad habits. And the secret to habit making or habit eliminating is you have to focus on your identity. It's kind of a weird concept, but it's really about changing who you are, not focusing on the outcome or the process. So what do I mean by that in terms of negotiating? If I want to become a really good negotiator and get excellent results, I need to change myself. I need to look and change my identity. I need to become that person who would be an excellent negotiator so that I can do the things that I need to do. And it really is, another way of putting this is the phrase be, do, have, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, which means you've got to become who you need to be in order to do the things you need to do, in order to have the things you want to have. So it's a focusing on becoming who you need to be. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that inside. But that shift of focusing instead of on outcome or process, but on becoming who you need to be is the key to getting those long-term excellent habits. And the last thing about excellence I would just point out is a big difference between excellence and perfection, right? In order to negotiate and get good results, you do not have to be perfect. You know, I do not win or lose a case because I was perfect or not perfect. Excellent is good enough. So we're not trying to get perfect here. We're just trying to get to excellence, okay? Now, the next letter of this formula is M, which stands for mastering, okay? So what is it that we're trying to master, okay? Well, we're going to try and master the 5 core concepts of this formula, which are the 5 C's that I'm going to talk about. But I just want to say a word or two about mastering, because that's the mindset one needs to have in order to get to that next level. It's a conscious intention that you have to set. You have to have that mindset that I'm going to master this, because anytime we hear somebody's a master at anything, right? A master craftsman, or somebody who's playing in the masters, right? In golf, right? Or a master chess player or a grandmaster, we know they're really, you know, at the top of their profession, right? So it's a conscious decision. But in addition to the conscious intention that one has to have, there's also something that I like to point out. It's called mastering your subconscious programming, because that also plays a role in your ability to do what you need to do, okay, and become who you need to become. And all of us have, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, have some limiting beliefs or some negative programming that might be subconscious. And by definition, we're unaware of it. And people have said the subconscious brain is about 100,000 times more powerful than our conscious minds. So you can have a conscious intent to master these next 5 concepts that I'm going to talk about. But if you have subconscious programming that's limiting you, maybe you've got some programming that says, you know, you don't deserve to get success, or you don't deserve to get this, or you're not good enough. Or you don't, nobody's going to like you if you stand out. Let's say if you start getting really the results you want or getting what you're asking for. If you have some type of subconscious program that you're unaware of, then in the long haul, your subconscious mind's going to win out over your conscious mind. So the concept about mastering is not only is it an intention, a conscious decision, but it's also a recognition that there may be an aspect of trying to eliminate subconscious programming that could be limiting you or sabotaging you without you being aware of it. And there's an expression that says, we are not responsible for the subconscious programming that we received in childhood, but as an adult, you are 100% responsible for fixing it. And I like that expression a lot because it always reminds me that no matter what might be going on within my subconscious world, I have the responsibility of fixing that. And you need to be aware of that potentially as another possibility of something that might be blocking you from getting the results that you want to get. Okay, so that's the M. Now, the first letter of this formula, they all start with C, but the first C is commitment, because this is really important when it comes to getting negotiation excellent results consistently. And there's 2 concepts about commitment that I want to talk about. One is the general overview of commitment that you need in order to achieve consistent excellence. You have to make, a commitment to what? To excellence, right? Vince Lombardi says, the quality of a man's life is directly related to his commitment to excellence, regardless of his chosen field of endeavor, right? That's a classic expression that Vince Lombardi said many years ago. And it really holds true, whether you're playing sports, whether you're playing golf, right? You got to be committed to that shot, right? Or whether you're trying to get good negotiating results, you have to have a level of commitment. And this formula, the reason I start out with commitment is because the formula rises or falls based on your level of commitment to working this formula. So that's first the general overview about commitment. But the second part of commitment is really on a micro level for a particular negotiation, right? So when you're in a negotiation, you do need to be committed, right, to your position, and you need clarity. That's the point about commitment. You need clarity about what it is that are deal breakers and what terms might there be room to negotiate or wiggle room or some room for movement, right? Because after all, most negotiations are a compromise on some level, right? But the key I want to say is that you need that clarity ahead of time before the negotiation starts, because it's too late. Once you start negotiating, and a lot of times negotiations are, they just happen. Somebody's right in front of you. If you're at a store, if you're on the phone, it's happening right then and there. And you need to be committed. You need to have clarity before, because once you start negotiating for something that's meaningful, right? Again, I'm not talking about whether to go out for Chinese or Italian food. I'm talking about something meaningful, really meaningful. That's going to bring up potentially some stress, some nerves, some anxiety. When that starts to happen during the negotiation, it's too late to be committed and know what you want. You have to have that beforehand, because when you have that clarity before the negotiation starts and you've really thought it through and you know that this is what I want, this is where I'm going to walk away, and these are the items that I can move on. When you know that ahead of time, then your voice will be different. Your tone, your body demeanor, your nonverbal gestures will be different. What you say matters and how you say it matters. And if you're not committed ahead of time and you don't have that clarity before the negotiation starts, you will be less likely to stay the course and less likely to be committed to your initial position that you thought, because of those nerves, that anxiety, and all those other doubts that creep up. So that's the 2 points about commitment I want to make. One is the overall committed, that you're going to commit to this formula. And the second is being clear about what it is you want before the negotiation starts, so that you can, present it in the most confident and effective way. Okay. The next letter of this formula is confidence, right? Because we all want to be confident when we negotiate. It's never a good look for an attorney to walk in and not be confident, right? And sometimes it's hard to be confident because I don't have a good case. I don't have a good client. The facts are against me. The law's against me. But I still have to come across as confident in my position. And if you're negotiating for something for yourself in a relationship, let's say with your spouse, maybe you want to play golf, all day next Monday, and she doesn't want you to, or on the weekend, she wants you to plant bushes. It will make a difference how you talk, right? I mean, sometimes it won't, I guess, on a spouse situation, but all kidding aside, but when you're negotiating, you do want to be confident, right? So what is confidence all about? It's easy to say I want to be confident, but what makes up something, what makes up a person who's able to be confident? Well, to me, there's 4 key components, or 4 legs of a bar stool, let's call it. Knowledge, preparation, belief, and experience. Those are the 4 pillars of confidence. So let's talk about each of those for a second. Knowledge is usually within your control for the most part on something that's meaningful to you. You should, I guess my point is, it's inexcusable not to have the knowledge about what it is you're negotiating for, what you want. You need to know that clearly. And you should, in this day and age with the internet, there's really no excuse not to have a lot of knowledge about something that you might not otherwise be able to have knowledge, right? Years ago, you go into a car dealership, you didn't know what was going on with the car, what it really cost. You had to rely on that sticker, right? Now you can walk into a car dealership and you can have a really good idea of what the value of that car is, what other people have paid. The point being, you really should be able to get a lot of knowledge about what it is you're trying to negotiate for ahead of time. That's usually within your control. Certainly as a lawyer, I know the facts from my client. I can get discovery and get facts from the other side. But even in situations, and I recognize there are going to be situations you don't know everything on the other side. I get that. But my point is that you have to do your due diligence. There's no excuse for that. Knowledge is power, right? Then preparation. That is the one area that you can easily separate yourself from anybody else if you do your preparation. And if it's, negotiating for yourself, I understand many of you or most of you are retired, or maybe all of you are retired. That doesn't mean, as I said earlier, if you're negotiating for a product, a big TV or a furniture or a house, or work with a contractor that's coming to do work at your house, That doesn't mean that you can't prepare in advance. And preparing doesn't mean just thinking about it. Sometimes it means going a little bit further and maybe bouncing it out off of somebody out loud, actually doing a little rehearsing or talking in the car, maybe when you're driving. I do that. You see me sometimes, I'm not on the phone. I'm actually rehearsing. I'm actually saying what I think I need to say, because the reason I stress that is because a lot of times we think we know what we're going to say and we think we know it. But when you don't hear yourself say it, when you do, sometimes it doesn't really sound like you know it as much as you think you do. And it's like anything. It's like, going to play golf. Let's use that metaphor, right? If I go from the parking lot to the first tee, yeah, I can drive off on the first tee. But am I going to be as confident as if I didn't hit a couple of balls ahead of time? I still may not hit a great shot, even if I hit a couple of balls, but I'm certainly going to feel more confident on the first tee. And it's no different with making a negotiation argument or putting your position out there. If you know how it sounds ahead of time, and for me, that's one of the ways that I really incorporate it and know it, so that when I say it, when it matters, that's the key. When it matters is not the first time you want to hear it, because more times than not, you stumble through it. So why not take that extra second and prepare? And that is the one area, as I said, that you can separate yourself, because it's not fun, it's not glamorous, it's tedious, it could be boring. You could come up with a lot of reasons not to, but it ties back to what I said at the beginning. That's the commitment. If you want to get an excellent result, you're going to have to do the things that you need to do in order to have the things that you want to have. And that's one of them, is preparation. And the next part of confidence is belief. Because if you don't believe in what you're negotiating for and what you're asking for, if you don't really believe it and come across as if you believe it, why should the other person that you're negotiating with believe your position? Why should they if you don't even believe it? You have to have a belief. And if that means suspending reality temporarily so you can have a belief, which I have had to do many times, I have to believe, my client is innocent here, and maybe he really wasn't, or the money. I have to suspend that reality so that I come across like I believe in what I'm asking for, because that's how it comes across as confident. So if you're having trouble believing that you really deserve what you're asking for in a negotiation, or you have any doubt about what it is that you're trying to get, you have to ask yourself why, because that is a critical part. Belief really is important. That expression, it's how you say, it's not what you say, right? There really is some truth to that. How you say things really matters, okay? And I'm not discounting the substantive part that you need too, but how you say it talks about your believability index. And the last point is experience. That certainly goes into being confident. And there's no substitute for experience. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all things being equal, if two people have knowledge and prepared and have belief, the party that has all the experience is certainly going to feel more confident than the person who doesn't. That being said, you have sat, I'm sure, on a three-legged stool at some point of your life. You can still have confidence without experience, because a lot of people will say, I don't have the experience, and they use that as an excuse not to be confident. But just think of any rookie that plays in any sport, right? There are rookies that haven't been in the league and they play with a tremendous level of confidence, right? Because they believe and they have knowledge of their skills and they prepared. And the same thing comes through in negotiation. There's many times I've negotiated with an attorney who has way more experience than I do in a particular area. They've been around longer. They've done that area of the law way more than I have. And I expect they're going to be way more confident than me. But the truth of the matter is, when we get into negotiating, I realize that they're not confident. They're not coming across confidently. And it's because maybe their experience was just showing up, but they didn't do the knowledge preparation or have the belief. So my point here is that experience is definitely important, but you can still be confident without the experience, and you can still get an excellent result even without that experience, okay? So that's what I want to say about confidence. The next C I want to talk about is courage, because it does take courage to negotiate, even for matters that are not business related, matters of the heart. It takes courage to put yourself on the line, to ask for what you want sometimes, to expose your vulnerability and your desires. That does take courage. It does take courage to negotiate. And it does take courage to ask for something maybe a little bit more than you might be comfortable asking for, or to negotiate with people that you might otherwise avoid to negotiate. A lot of people do not want to do negotiations sometimes on any particular subject. Could be a personal relationship, could be something they're buying for themselves, could be something they have to talk about or negotiate with their child. They don't want to do it because it makes them uncomfortable, and they get fear or they get doubt, and they then back away. That's why it does take courage, okay? So whenever we talk about courage and what do we need to be courageous when we're negotiating, we have to talk about fear and doubt, because those are the two areas or factors that inhibit us. So what is it about fear? What is it really? In my experience doing this myself for many years, but even talking to other people in terms of negotiation and getting feedback, what it boils down to a lot of times? It boils down to an acronym that I came up with, which is FOOPO, which is FOOPO, which stands for fear of other people's opinions. Because that's really what it boils down to a lot of times. I don't want to offend this person. I don't want to look too greedy. I don't want to insult this person. I don't want to look foolish. I don't want to embarrass myself. I remember going into court many times early on, and I had a case of FOOPO, and I went in with my game face on, but I really was very fearful about looking not smart enough, to a judge, or think the other attorney might think I'm not smart enough. I had this FOOPO, and what it did is it really inhibited me from being my best at negotiating, because what I call FOOPO is really like fixed overhead. And if you have a mild case of FOOPO, even a mild case of FOOPO, it is going to cause you to be a little bit more self-conscious and not give you full access to your creative part of your mind, which you need sometimes when you're negotiating, because every negotiation is different. The other side says things sometimes that you're not expecting. Sometimes they make a really good point that, oh my God, that sounds really good. I didn't think of that. If you're very much in a state of worrying or overly concerned about how you're coming across or upsetting somebody else or giving them the wrong impression of you, if you've got that overhead going, then you lose access to coming up with that really good comeback to what they just said. Because when you're calm, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, when you don't have that FOOPO going through your system, you're more likely to be able to have access to the other areas of your mind that might be able to, come up with something to meet their objection, right? Or meet their point that they're trying to make. So that's really important, just to recognize that many times it's just about, our fears that are really in our heads, and then here's the other part of courage. Because it's one thing to feel the fear and do it anyway, right? That's a classic definition of courage. Feel the fear and do it anyway, right? So get in there and negotiate. But the other part of courage that I want you to take away is courage sometimes requires to go inside yourself and examine and excavate what it is inside of you that is making you fearful or making you doubt so much. Because why is that courageous to do that? Because that type of work can be very painful at times, because we got to excavate out old thoughts and patterns and maybe emotions that have never been fully expressed about other areas of our life that are actually like a reservoir of pain or uncomfort. And when we're negotiating, we're trying to avoid that because we don't want to tap into that. So our behavior shifts and our presentation of what we're trying to negotiate for changes. So courage, the concept of courage in this formula is, that it does take courage to go and ask for what you want, but it also takes courage to look within yourself, because you may have to examine and excavate those areas that might be holding you back from negotiating as effectively as you could. The next letter is, or word, I should say, is compassion. Okay, this is really critical when you're dealing with negotiating with people who have what I call challenging personalities, right? Because negotiations oftentimes involve different people. In your family, sure, it's going to be the same people, but the subject matter might be different. But we do run into what I call challenging personalities, and having compassion rather than being triggered is really important so that you can stay on course. Because what is it that you're looking to do? You're looking to get that excellent result. And I know from experience, when I've negotiated with other attorneys, or sometimes with prosecutors that have, some of them, there's a lot of great attorneys and nice personalities and a lot of great prosecutors. And let me put my disclaimer out there first. But that being said, there are a few that really have some real, what I would call, challenging personalities. And they talk to me sometimes. I've been spoken to with, disrespect or condescension. And, I come from a very athletic background. And if somebody says something to you on the court, right, or on the field that you don't like, as an athlete, you're not going to take that, right? But in court, I have to sort of weather that storm and be compassionate that that individual is going through something. It's not about me. It's about him, or it's about her. And I have to be able to not get triggered so that I can stay focused on what I'm trying to get. And this is not easy. I'm going to be the first one to say it is not easy to be compassionate, but it's also not judging anybody else either. It's more that position of, I've been there too. And I will say there's been a few times that I've had negotiations where they were going off the rails, quite frankly, because the other party was just out of order, and I had to call timeout, and I literally said, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I know I haven't said anything to you today in any way, shape, or form that would warrant the tone or the language that you're using. And, I get it. I've been there. I've been there too. I've done this at times that I haven't maybe been fully aware of. Can we start over? And I stick my hand out, and I got to tell you, anytime I've had to do that, and thankfully I've only had to do that a couple of times, but anytime that I've had to do that, I've gotten a fantastic result, because usually the other party is somewhat contrite about how they were coming across when you point it out. There was one time I will never forget, this other attorney just did not accept the fact that he was acting the way he was acting. And, I left the courthouse that day saying, just thankful and being grateful that that wasn't going on, because you never know what's going on in somebody else's life, right? That's the point. Somebody could be having a really difficult financial situation, a marriage, the kids could be on drugs. You don't know what is going on. So compassion, the reason I'm stressing compassion so much is it really is a position of strength. And everything about this formula, the formula is called the power of E equal MC to the fifth, right, is designed to put you in negotiation strength. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have the stronger position, but you yourself can be in a position of strength. And again, all of these are going to work together. And the last thing I want to say about compassion is have compassion for yourself, right? Because it is not easy to negotiate. It is not easy to get out of your comfort zone. It is not easy to do it. So don't beat yourself up during a negotiation. That's never going to help. And even after the negotiation, we have a tendency to replay things and wonder, I wish I said that. I know what that's like. I've been that way. I've had a hard time being compassionate to myself sometimes, because I can be a little bit of a perfectionist, as I said earlier, right? Instead of just trying to get excellent, I'm sometimes a perfectionist, and I find myself beating myself up, and it doesn't work. So also, if you're compassionate for yourself, you will have an easier time finding that necessary compassion for that person who has that challenging personality that day. So that's all I wanted to say about compassion. I want to move to the last C, which is called calmness. And calmness is really another position of strength, right? Calmness, think about it, right? Calmness, we want our leaders to be calm, right? We want the guy taking the last shot when the time's running out on the clock. We want that guy who's going to be clutch, right? And normally that person is calm or calmer, believes in himself, and he can execute. He's certainly well aware of the significance of the moment, but he's calm. And so what I want the takeaway to be for calmness is really when it comes to objections or pushback that you get, because real negotiations do not start until somebody says no. You can make the best presentation of your case for yourself, whatever it is, right? You can do all the preparation, have all the knowledge, believe in what you want, and put it out there, have the courage to go for it. And then somebody says, yeah, that's great, but no. Now we got to start negotiating, right? And this is the time where you have to be calm. It's when that objection comes. So why am I stressing calm in leadership? Because you have to think of negotiating as your opportunity to lead the other side to where you want them to go. After all, that's what you want to do, right? You want to persuade them that you have a very reasonable position or a better position than they do, or that you're right about something, whatever the case may be. The goal is to lead them. And in order to be an effective leader, it's much better to be calm than to be stressed or anxious while you're trying to do that, or be reactive or defensive, right? So calm is critical. So how do we get calm, right? How do we get calm? Well, it ties into some of the earlier things that I've talked about, which is, doing all that prior work, having the knowledge, being prepared, right? Believing in what you're saying. But it also ties into, you should likely know or be able to anticipate the likely objections that are going to come your way on what you're asking for or negotiating for. Even if it's something that you're trying to buy, what's the most likely? Oh, I can't sell it to you for that low, right? You know that's coming if you want to get them to come down in price or her to come out, or I can't give you all these services for that amount of money. You know what that objection is more than likely going to be. So do your homework in advance so that when that objection comes, you can calmly say, I thought you might say that, or I was anticipating that would be what you would say. And here's why I think what I'm asserting is very reasonable in light of that objection. And the other thing about calmness, to stay calm, is to validate the objection before you rush back in to try to persuade on your point. Validating what somebody is objecting to serves two purposes. One, it shows them that you hear them. People want to be heard. They want to know you're listening, right? They don't want to know that you're just on pause waiting to talk, right? Because we know we've all had conversations with people where they're not talking when you're talking, but they're not really listening to you. When you validate an objection and you're not agreeing, you're just validating, you're repeating back to them in their own words or paraphrasing what their objection is. By doing that, you are showing them that you hear them, you get them, you understand them. That's number one. That makes somebody feel like, okay, you heard me. And the benefit of that is that it puts them a little bit more at ease, where they don't just think you're ignoring their objection, because that's actually disrespectful and doesn't put people in a proper mindset to hear you. Because after all, if you have a better position, you believe, don't you want them to hear it and let it really get into them? Well, put them in a better state to receive it by validating their objections first, just so you get them to know that you hear them. The other purpose that it serves is that it gives you some time. Validation doesn't take a lot of mental resources to do, because you're just parroting back to them what they've already told you. So if you repeat back, I understand your objection is you think I want too many services for this price, right? What's he going to say? Yes, of course, because that's what he just told you. So it doesn't take any mental resources to validate, but what it does is it does give you a little extra time, if you need it, to think of something to say in response to that if you haven't already thought of something. So it also allows you to maintain that calmness, because you're busy validating, but you're thinking, hopefully, of something to come back or how you're going to say it. It's like that duck going across the pond, right? It looks like that duck is just gliding effortlessly across the pond, but his feet are really moving really hard underneath. That's about being calm. And the other thing about being calm is, and I understand that if you're retired, this may not apply to you as much, but in terms of advice, to clients or customers, right? And maybe this might be to family members, whatever the case may be, when you're calm, your clients, your customers, they pick up your vibe. And it's much better for you to be calm when you're facing objections than nervous and, touching, sweating and all that stuff, because that stuff, comes across. So calm is just another position of strength and power. And you get there by doing some of the other stuff that I talked about earlier. So just to sum up, it's E equal MC to the fifth. And the C's that we're talking about, just imagine yourself right now. Picture yourself getting ready to negotiate, and you're committed. You have clarity. about what it is you're negotiating. You know the terms you're looking for, and you know the areas where there's some room. Imagine yourself committed with that clarity. Imagine yourself feeling confident about being able to articulate what your position is because you've got the knowledge, you've prepared, you believe in it. So imagine yourself feeling confident, feeling clear about it, having the courage that you know you're going to ask for this and you're comfortable about that. And then knowing that you're going to be in this state of having compassion if you get some real negative attitude coming back your way, and you're going to be calm no matter what. If you put yourself thinking about all 5 of those C's working together, I'm telling you, you will see dramatic results in your negotiation. It doesn't mean you have to have mastered every one of them before you're going to see some real significant results. It just means that as you improve in all of these areas, ideally to get to that level that I just described, where you've got all 5 of them working together in tandem, there's no doubt in my mind, I'm extremely confident that you will see excellent negotiation results on a consistent basis. So that's really the form. That's all I have to share with you. I do have one other thing I wanted to just bring out, just in terms of, we were talking about golf. So I do have a little giveaway today that's golf related, actually. So I can, I think I can share my screen. Let me just see if I can do that.
Okay, let me permit you.
Want to give me screen sharing?
He's already
go ahead.
closed.
All right, so let me see, screen share. Okay. So if you can see this, if you go to my website, firstclasscle.com, and hopefully you can see this, there's a course that I just came out with called Birdies, Bogeys, and Burdens of Proof. I make CLE classes, which are continuing legal education classes for attorneys. But this course, you don't have to be an attorney to get the value out of this course. It talks about all different types of cases that have happened. I give a historical view of the cases in New Jersey about people that have been injured from being hit with a golf ball, and what the standard of care is, the burden of proof. I talk about things like unannounced mulligans and yelling for, and when you hit a caddy, and all sorts of interesting cases that have come up throughout the years. So if you go to that website, firstclasscle.com, you could just click on the course. There's a golf ball there to register, and I have a coupon code that you can use that will make this course free for everybody who wants to take it if you're interested. And I'm going to go, I went out on the limb here and came up with something really crazy for a coupon code. It's Old Guard. So all you got to do is type in Old Guard, but don't put a space between old and guard. It doesn't matter if it's capital or small letters, but use Old Guard when it comes up for registering and you have to, look like you have to pay. There's a spot that says, do you have a coupon? Click on that, put in Old Guard. It'll take 100% off. It's an hour-long course, so it won't take too much. And then you can watch it online, watch it online on your computer, on your laptop or whatever. And then the only thing I would ask, if you take it and you like it, there's an evaluation form. Just please, fill out the evaluation form and send that back to me. I just launched this course about 2 weeks ago, so it's kind of timely that we're talking a little bit about golf today. So that's my little giveaway if you want to find out some interesting stuff. It actually really does help, because when you're playing golf, you start thinking about these cases and what you need to do and what you don't need to do.
Wow.
Okay.
That's great. Ready for questions and answers? Well, questions first.
Okay, we're ready for questions. Going to begin with Victor Rosenberg. Would you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. So, Counselor, while you're in a pro bono mood, can I negotiate a potential real life example with you to see how you would handle a situation?
Sure.
I have a son-in-law who is 54 years old. He was raised in a family that was doctor phobic.
Okay.
He has not had a physical in many, many years, if at all. My daughter and my 2 grandchildren are all prevailing on him to get a physical. He's never had a colonoscopy or blood work. And I have been trying to reason with him to get a physical because I love him and I want him to live to enjoy the lives of the people who he's the father and husband of. You're up, counselor. Bless you, my
No,
child.
my goodness.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Bless you for giving me the answer I'm looking for.
Oh, okay. So, all right. I thought there was going to be more to that, but so it's just really about trying to convince him to do that, to get that physical, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the first thing that I would say is normally to have effective capability of persuading somebody in a situation where there's this refusal to do something is to try to extract out of them what is the basis for why he doesn't want to go for this physical, right? You got to peel the onion on that. Okay. And let me just finish my point. It's two things. It's one, he may have some logical reasons in his mind why he doesn't want to go for a physical, but you got to get beyond that and ask and dig down a little deeper. And part of that, and this is where courage comes in, okay? Because this is somebody that you care about and there's other people that care about him, right? This is where some vulnerability has to come into play, is the way I see it, is that by putting yourself on the line or whoever wants him to go for this physical and saying how valuable this person is to their lives and how much they mean to them and how much you love them and how much, we want you to stay healthy, and putting all of this on the line can sometimes soften somebody who might have a hard heart and some walls built up as to why they're avoiding to go for this physical. A lot of times my first reaction is it's usually like the person's in denial. I had a friend, to give you an idea, didn't go to the dentist for about 30 years. His tooth was out. He was in sales. And I would go and see him every once in a while. He's got missing tooth. And I'm like, you're in sales and you don't have a tooth and you won't even go to the dentist it looks stupid. You look like an idiot and you're in sales and you have a missing tooth. You look like you're, some hillbilly somewhere who doesn't have dental. Why? For 25 years, 30 years, he just came up with one reason after another to avoid it. But usually it's about the fear is in their mind that it's going to be something terrible, right? I'm sure your son-in-law is thinking, oh my God, if I go for this physical, it's going to be terrible. I'm going to be found on, something terminal. I'm going to die. So then what does that really tell you? It's a fear of death, right? So, okay, so let's talk about that. Get that out on the table. What is it about death that scares you? It's almost like cut to the chase with this guy, because that's what it sounds like. Don't sugarcoat. It sounds like you don't want to go to the doctor because you don't want to see what might be the results, because they might be really negative and they might lead to death or maybe some type of incapacitation or disease or something. Okay. But by not going, is that going to stop death? Is that going to stop the condition from happening? Is that going to make it better? Are you making it better in a way for the loved ones around you? Actually, with all due respect, you're being selfish, because you're now indirectly and directly affecting the potential of your life here. And these other people that are counting on you and relying on you and love you, you're being selfish. So let's, at some point, the gloves might have to come off a little bit, because you've tried to sugarcoat it and be nice, and you probably said all the right things. But if you've got this persistent, resistance, you might have to escalate it a little bit. I don't mean like in a personal attack. I just mean like you might have to get a little uncomfortable with going there. And going there might be saying, goes back to the FUPO. Man, if I call this guy selfish, maybe he's not going to like me. Right. I'm afraid that he won't like me as much. Well, you know what? The hell with that. What's more important, him liking you or him getting him to the doctor? What's the end game?
Well, listen, first of all, thank you. You've given me some good buzzwords and some good entrees to the conversation I'm going to make an appointment to have with him. And I'm sorry if my question was created a too verbose time on the rest of the group here, but I really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. No problem.
Hey, Mark.
Alan Hamilton is next.
Well, Counselor, thank you very much. You convinced me.
With
I
what?
just played golf yesterday and I almost got hit, so I may have needed you, but I take it.
It's tough to win those cases, let me tell you.
Yeah, I know. I do construction management. I'm still working, and I do construction claims, and this is an adversarial process, and it's not necessarily a negotiation. And I've got one coming up that is going to be adjudicated in London. But my question is, of the 5 C's, my theory is that confidence and calmness are probably more important because you're not negotiating. You're convincing an arbitrator or a judge and a jury about what you want. So compassion and courage and all this, that may underlie it, but that isn't necessarily the most important one. But what's your view on that?
Oh, yeah, I think that's a very valid point. I mean, if you're litigating, right? I mean, I spend my background is all litigation, right? So my negotiation experience is derived from litigating cases, right? So for me, when I talk about, being confident and calm and all that stuff, ultimately, I have a point where it's like, you know what, if we can't resolve this, we're going to trial, right? That's where I talk about being clear about things and coming across, like in your situation, if it's not going to be resolved, the alternative is having a trial, right? So I would agree that being confident about your position, being calm to handle your objections, absolutely is very important. But and maybe that's more important than compassion, let's say, in that situation. But certainly courage comes into play because you might have to try the case. And you know what? There's risks involved whenever you try a case. You can lose, right? I mean, It may sound like you got a winner, but you can lose. You never know. So it does take courage sometimes to stick to your guns and say, this is where we're at. And you can be as listen, I'm very confident sometimes and look like I'm going to trial. And I know in the back of my mind, it's almost like playing poker. Might have to fold here, but I've got to look like I'm going to trial sometimes. But I know in the back of my mind, I can't even have a trial. We're going to lose. They have all the facts. They're right. We are all wrong. I know that, but I have to, at least at that moment in time, come across confident in what I'm asking for. So I definitely agree that confidence is certainly, like I said, it's never a good look if you're not confident, right? But, the other components all factor into that really on some level. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I definitely do not disagree that being confident and being calm when you're in a litigation situation are probably very, very important and maybe a little bit more important than the compassion. The commitment I still think is necessary. You got to be committed to your position, and the courage, as I said, you might need courage to say, this is where we're at, and where we're walking away, right? That does take courage. Sometimes that takes courage. If you've got to be responsible for me, I'm responsible, right? In a lot of ways. So if I'm saying to my client, listen, we're going to go to trial if they don't, this is my recommendation. Obviously I'll do whatever you want, but this is my professional opinion. I'm putting my neck on the line there a little bit, right? If we have a trial and my client loses and he either owes a ton of money or he's going to jail or something, I'm feeling that. That does take courage, So I'm a big believer courage comes into play when it comes to negotiating. But
I agree. And I've faced those situations where I had a client that was in an untenable position and doomed to lose. And you got to figure out how to tell them.
Yeah,
in a nice way.
Absolutely. And that's actually, and it's really, you raise a good point. I mean, negotiating also includes negotiating with your clients, right? I mean, how many times I have to talk common sense and, I have clients that are just, have really bad views of what's going on. And then you have to not offend them. I am aware of that. And by the way, I don't mean to say, you can't be aware. I actually, this is a really good point that you kind of just made me think of, is that it is okay to be aware of how you're coming across to other people when you're negotiating. That's actually a strength, to be sensitive and have an appreciation for, are you coming off as a jerk or not? I mean, so yeah, you have to be mindful of how you come across. So that's different than FUPO. FUPO is where you're overly concerned about this. But I definitely am an advocate for being mindful of how you're coming across, because, people don't like to negotiate with jerks, right? You want to come across like a nice, respectable individual, and you want to show respect for the other side. That's only going to work to your advantage. So.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Alan. Next is Paul.
Lawrence, thank you so much. It's a wonderful talk, and no less than I expected, having talked to you the other day. You've given us a tremendous amount of salient information and advice. I'm going to have to hear it a few times before a lot of it's going to fully sink in. And of course, I'm going to have to practice, because you don't get these things instantly. But this is really quite wonderful. Now, I actually have one question. It happens to be another C, but I don't think it's elevated to the level of the 5 that you have already. But what would you say is the role of compromise in all of this?
Oh, okay. A great question. Listen, as I may have mentioned in the presentation, most negotiations are really some type of compromise, right? There's that classic saying, the definition of a good settlement is when both parties leave the courthouse not happy, right? So, compromise is real. You have to be prepared. Listen, there's different types of negotiations, right? There might be a negotiation with your child you're not going to compromise on, right? So that's maybe not a level playing field. But if you're looking at a situation where it's either litigation maybe, or we're having a trial, there's going to be something inside of the party's mind that they probably want to settle this and resolve this. Most people don't want to have problems, and you can really advocate, for a win-win, right? That's what a compromise, that's the way I try to look at a compromise. It's a win-win. And one of the best things you can do in a negotiation is try to point out all the common goals you both have. Look, we both want to resolve, like in that construction, we both want to resolve this claim, right? We both want to go on. If it's a dispute with a neighbor, listen, I don't want to drive home to my house and be stressed out because you and I are arguing, right? There's a common, the more items that you can bring up that you both have in common will help you both reach a compromise. So yes, compromise is most likely necessary in most negotiations if you want to resolve something. And you yourself have to be confident that you're being reasonable. And so that's what comes to my mind is that, are you sure? Because here's the thing. Usually both sides think the other side's being unreasonable. I do a lot of work as a mediator too, by the way, and I've mediated a lot of disputes. And that's usually the problem is that, we're not being reasonable, they're being unreasonable. And the other side thinks the exact same thing. So what I would advise is make sure you really are being reasonable. Look to objective evidence. If you can find objective evidence that supports your position, right? In a classic litigation, that might be an expert, right? Even though experts aren't necessarily objective, if you're paying for an expert and they're paying for an expert, they're not really that objective. But there might be, in your particular negotiation, objective evidence of what a reasonable position is in this situation. And if you can find objective evidence, it's great, because now you're shifting the focus away from you and him and or her who you're negotiating with, and you're looking at this objective evidence. And look, don't take my word for it. Here's what the Kelley Blue Book value is, here's what the other value, here's all the other sites if you're selling a car, right? Here's objective evidence that supports my position, and that helps get a compromise. So my two things are objective evidence and also being reasonable yourself, and make sure you're being reasonable and have it in your mind. What are those areas that you can work on? Because yes, most negotiations will include some type of compromise, and that's not a bad thing to compromise. If the bigger picture is that do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right? You want to be right or do you want to be happy? And we can get caught up trying to be right. And I have plead guilty to that. I didn't even know when I first heard that expression many years ago, I didn't even know what that meant. I'm thinking, how can you be happy if you're not right? It's like, these are two different things. I couldn't even understand it. And I understand it a lot better now, and you can get that. Let me tell you, if you're married, and I'm not married anymore, but let me tell you, I know what it's like to be married, and I know what it's like to never win an argument. And I know what it's like to try to be right It's not worth it sometimes. Sometimes it is worth it to be happy. Sometimes it is worth it to be right, but sometimes it's not. And as an attorney, there are times where, we are going to just fight to be right here because it is worth it. The principle is worth it. And we're not going to pay a penny. And I've advised clients like that, you know what, you didn't do a thing wrong. Why should we pay them anything? And they feel the same way. Well, now we are going to be right. And it does feel good to win that case because there are times and places to be right. But if you're talking compromise, then if you live by that adage of, do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? And if you define happiness as not having this problem anymore and moving on with your life, most of the times that's the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rich Jager.
Thank you for a great talk. Your last comment reminds me of the saying that when they say it's the principle, not the money, it is the money. But my question is, sometimes you are not in a situation where you're preparing in advance, like buying a new car or confronting somebody about an issue. But it just sort of pops up. And just to make that a little more concrete, I had an example where there was a fallen tree at my back fence, and there was an issue with the neighbor. And I guess I assumed that we would simply have a reasonable compromise. But all of a sudden, no, they were adamant that, nope, completely my problem. They have nothing to do with it. What do you do when you all of a sudden find yourself in a situation like that, where I guess it is a negotiation or could be, but you have not prepared, and there you are.
Yeah, that's called thinking on your feet in a way, or negotiating right there spontaneously. What you do is you try to, summon up. This is sort of where it takes some courage, right? Because let's say your neighbor has really offended you, which it sounds like it, right? Or maybe they hurt your feelings by taking such a aggressive stance and not even willing to negotiate it, right? You might try that, right at the moment, but that does take courage, right? Because it's hey, you might say, and this is a great way of sort of giving yourself a little time, it's like, with all due respect, that line is used a lot, with all due respect, it's a little bit offensive that you're taking such a strong, hey, this is my problem. I'm going to take a look at that. I think it's only fair if this was reversed, put it back to them. If the role was reversed and it was your, whatever, the tree on his property or whatever the situation is, if this was the other way around, I don't think I would take that position with you. I think I would be more likely to see, what are the facts here? Legally, how does this work? I don't know. This never happened to me before. I got to look this up. I got to do a little research or homework on this. And I hope you'll keep an open mind to, what may be the real appropriate and reasonable solution, because I would do that for you. Now that's not easy to say spontaneously, but it does, in my view, try to diffuse a potentially very ugly situation. And it does take some courage to put yourself out there and show, hey, that was, the kind of, you could say that, hey, that, that's a little disturbing to hear, your language is tricky, right? Do you want to say, hey, that hurt my feelings? You might want to say, hey, that's a little, that's a little bit I'm a little taken back by that approach. It seems so aggressive. I'm not trying to pin something on you. That's not my responsibility. I'm more than willing to take full responsibility if that's the case. But coming right out of the gate like a rocket at me, you're setting the wrong tone. And I would just ask and invite you. I would invite, that's a good phrase. I would invite you. I would invite you to consider that maybe there's a different way that we can approach this, because I want to maintain our relationship as neighbors. I think it's more important that we have a good relationship as neighbors. And if you give that person that bigger picture, right, and show that it's a win-win proposition, because he doesn't want to have a bad problem with his neighbor either. So that would be my initial reaction to how to approach that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Al Aho is next.
A great talk. I'm looking at the Derek Chauvin trial, and I'm curious as to where does justice fit in if you just view it purely as a negotiation between the two sides trying to convince the jury that their point of view is correct. How do you feel about justice in a criminal trial and negotiation?
Well, the first thing I'd say is the time for negotiations are over, right? Because you're now trying the case. So now it's not about negotiation, it's about persuasion, because it's all about both sides trying to persuade the jury what their position is. So it's not about negotiation anymore. That's done. That day passed. So it's all about persuasion. And there's an expression, it's not about, when you go to court and you have a trial, it's not about the truth. It's about what you can prove. And that's sobering fact, but it is true. Many times in cases, even not a murder, case like this, something as egregious as that, but just take your most common cases, right? They're civil related and they're about money, right? It boils down to, do you have the witnesses? Do you have the evidence? Do you have the receipts? Do you have the documents? Do you have the people to come in and testify? Because sometimes you can't use the documents because it's hearsay. So it's about, can you prove your case? And that's really what it's all about. And it gets, unfortunately, a lot of times we see the results of trials. We don't necessarily know everything. Some of them are not televised, right? And you're not privy sometimes to all the legal motions that go on behind the scenes. So you don't always know the absolute truth of what happened in a case. But sometimes, we have a good feeling of what justice should be. And it's obvious, what justice should be. And certainly in this case, in my view. But to answer your question, to go to your point, it's all about persuasion at this point. And so that's just going to tie into confidence, right? And preparation and all that stuff. And I'm sure both sides have done everything that they should do to prepare themselves. So they are now confident. They need, that's the thing. You've got to, that attorney who's arguing for the defendant has to really believe in what he's saying, right? He can't look not confident, even in the facts look against him and the law looks against him. He's got to come across as confident. And all he can do is make an argument. Right? All he can do is make the most effective, persuasive argument that he can make. And his goal is to get at least one jury to agree with him. Right? But it is all about persuasion at this point.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. Alan is next.
That was a fascinating discourse. And I think you've already answered some of the questions that I had in mind, particularly the ones that Paul asked about compromise. But as I was listening to you over and over again, I was trying to picture you negotiating with an opposite number over something or other, and wondering how often you find your opponent practicing E equals MC to the fifth just as well as you are, and or are you finding it a very superior way of dealing with your competition? And just wondered what your experience in practice is with this formula.
Thanks, Alan, for the question. It's mixed. I will say this. I definitely know right off the bat, when I'm start negotiating, I can tell almost instantaneously whether somebody is doing, their version of E equal MC to the fifth or not, because I can tell from the way somebody negotiates, what they say, what they don't say, their body language. Now, again, I'm going back to more when this pandemic doesn't exist, because it's a little bit trickier now with the Zoom. I mean, I had a trial not that long ago and it was all Zoom. It was just very weird, to do, because you really lose a little bit of that, in the courtroom feel for what's going on, but it still can work. And it did work, but it's harder, I think, to cross-examine somebody when they are sitting at a terminal at their house or someplace, but to your question, yes, I can tell, because I know when I'm talking to somebody, if they're really committed to that position or not, from how they speak about it and what they say and how well they know their case or the facts, because there's things that, they'll misstate certain facts that really, I think to myself, how could you say that? Like, you should know that. Or they don't know the law. I'm in the middle of a case right now that is actually a case that I won, but my adversary is appealing it. And they're going to lose on appeal too. But many times during that case, I had to write, deal with motions that they were making and write legal briefs to the court. And normally when I get in a brief from my adversary, I'm expecting it to be, on point and very cogent, and like, I'm going to be stressing about what I'm going to say to refute their arguments. And in this particular case, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh my God, it was a woman. She's teeing this up for me. She's literally teeing this up for me. Her arguments are so bad and they're so mischaracterizing what the law is. It was like having a field day, shooting fish in a barrel. And that rarely happens, that it's so egregious, but it goes to the level of incompetence that exists out there. So there does come times where it's very noticeable. By the same token, there's times when I come into court and I'm negotiating, let's say, with a prosecutor who's really good, who's very professional, knows his case, knows he's in the driver's seat because, my client has been charged with something that he did do. And, it's going to be tough for me to win that. And I can go in there and be confident and all that stuff. And so is he. And it's like, it makes it difficult. That's where it's like, got to compromise. That's when I go to my plan B, which is let's show how many things we have in common to resolve this with a deal, as opposed to not getting a deal. So it's like, I may want the charges to be downgraded. And one of the ways I might try and persuade a prosecutor who's hesitating to downgrade or dismiss a couple of, maybe it's multiple charges and I want him to throw out a couple. I'll have my client plead to one or two. Can you throw out these other ones? Maybe he doesn't want to throw out a couple of the ones that I need him to throw out. And again, it's like, well, look, you're still getting a conviction. My client's still going to plead guilty. He's still going to have it on his record. He's already suffered, his wife is, he's throwing him out or whatever, whatever I can show and tick off to try to show the other side that you're winning. You're getting a victory here, even though it's not maybe the ideal thing you wanted, but I'm asking you to compromise because here's all the things that you get too. And so that's kind of like a plan B when I don't have a lot to work with. It's like damage control. It's just trying to show those win-win things, items or issues, and being prepared in advance. Right? Because that's exactly going to the point of, if I don't think that through in advance of all the possible things that we have in common, you think I'm going to come up with all of that in a room? A lot of these negotiations, just to give you a little idea, like if it's a municipal court matter, a lot of times, just in a conference room, sometimes I'm in a conference room with the prosecutor and 10 cops who are sitting there waiting for each of the cases that, they have. That's a little bit intimidating, right? When you're trying to negotiate with a prosecutor, there's 10 cops around listening in, not even their cases maybe, but it's like you're going up against the firing squad. So if you can get intimidated and you can get off your game, or, somebody can start laughing at my idea about what I'm looking for, I don't care. But if I'm prepared in advance to have everything that I need to say, then it's only going to help me bring all of that out when that negotiation is occurring, because it can be as I said, it gets to be stressful and anxiety producing, and you just don't know. So got to know it in advance. I don't know if that answers your questions or not, but.
Thank you. Peter?
Oh, thanks for the talk, Lawrence. In my career, I was negotiating big ticket items around the world and throughout the United States. And there were a few factors that I found important, which I'm interested in your view of. I found the relationship with the counterparty being very important, and especially with multiple counterparties, building up a relationship and understanding what your counterparty really wants from the deal. We keep talking about pricing, and certainly the person may want the lowest price, but certainly it's not always the case. And to find out what other things that person or that entity wants, you need a relationship, time, and get to know what he really wants from the deal. And Another one is cultural differences. I even found differences in negotiating with somebody in New York or in South Carolina or in Venezuela or in China. The cultural differences and the way you approach talking with these people about things and the time you take in doing it. I wondered about that. And overall, respect. Respect for whoever it is you're dealing with, respect for their culture, and respect for what their wishes and desires are, which may not be yours, but have respect for how they view the negotiations and what they want from it. Appreciate your ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for the question. Going back to your first point about relationships, absolutely. Relationships matter, right? Relationships definitely matter. From my personal experience, if I'm doing a lot of municipal court work, I'm going often to the same courts on a regular basis, and there's the same prosecutor, right, in that court. And many times prosecutors are prosecutors in multiple courts, and just the judges are also judges in multiple courts. So I want to make sure that I have a good relationship with the prosecutor, and I want to make sure I maintain a good relationship with the judge, because I'm going to see these people again. It's not a one-time only situation. So absolutely, relationships matter, but it is tricky sometimes, right? Because, you know, you get to some negotiations where maybe the other side is being very unreasonable, and now, you want to maintain that relationship, but at the same time, you want to do what's best for your client. So there is a fine line sometimes that we have to, butt up against, I guess is the point. And there have been times where I've wanted to say things to prosecutors that I have to eat my words, because I know I've got another case with another client and it's not going to help me with that case. So to your point, relationships definitely matter. It's easier when I go into court, or if I'm on the phone with another attorney and I've had another case with them and we already have a good relationship. Absolutely, that helps so much in the entire negotiation process. There's a little bit more trust that's established, because a lot of times, you don't know whether you can take somebody's word for something. And if you don't know them, it's uncomfortable, right? But when you do have a relationship, you have to, that works to your advantage. So 100%, I believe relationships matter, and you should definitely do what you can to maintain them. And even if there's times where, it gets tricky, I have said things like, listen, I don't want this to affect our relationship in any way, because I really value you as a colleague. But if I recommend that to my client, I just can't do it. I cannot do that. I'm not trying to bust your chops here, but I can't in good faith recommend that. And I lose respect. My client would lose respect for me. You would lose. I've even said that. You would lose respect for me if I took your recommendation and tried to recommend it to my client. And I can't do that. So, so I put that relationship out there so they're aware of it and know that I value it. In terms of time and all that, if you're negotiating for big ticket items, yeah, those relationships are not, those negotiations are not usually quick. They are a matter of time. And that's where that relationship is more of a premium. When I'm negotiating sometimes on cases, it's a very quick negotiation. It might be showing up, in court for some traffic tickets. It's a 10-minute conversation, right? And it's not a lengthy negotiation. So it's not as much of a premium for that reason, but it's a premium because I'm going to see that same prosecutor. But I agree, if it's a big ticket item, you're going to need more time to try to get to an agreement and establishing trust through maintaining. And here's a good point, actually, to your point. Accountability is so critical when it comes to negotiations, especially the ones that take time, because it is so easy to get out of accountability if you don't return phone calls when you say you're going to do it. You don't send that email when you say you're going to do it. You don't fax that. You don't do the things that you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do them. Those are little items. But let me tell you, I've never had a case with an attorney who didn't return my phone call or send me back the email or send me the documents when he said he was going to. I've never had it end up at the end of the case where I said, boy, I really trusted that guy. What a pleasure to work with that guy. Conversely, if you do dot your I's and cross your T's on the little stuff, you are establishing trust. Those are little trust, pillars, right? Or foundation. The little things matter, because if I can't trust you on the little things, why in the world would you expect me to trust you on the big thing that you're asking me for? I don't trust you to begin with. You never do what you say you're going to do. You always, what, all of a sudden now I believe you when you want $50,000 or you want me to, now I'm going to believe you? You've been lying or you've been falling, short of your word the entire negotiation process. So accountability, and actually I give another talk on strategies, and that is one of the items I talk about is accountability. And it is critical. It is really critical. You are really making it way hard. It's no guarantee you're going to get what you want, right? Just returning phone calls and faxing and email, doing what you say you're going to do. No guarantee, but you're guaranteed to make it way harder for yourself if you don't do those things. And they're so easy to do. And every contractor that comes to your house to do a repair, do you know how easy it is for them to stand out compared to the other contractors who don't return your phone calls, who don't give you the written estimate, that say they're going to do it? How many times does that happen where the guys, I've had that happen. Oh, I'll send you, I'll put an estimate. You'll have it within 2 or 3 days. Never get it. Never get it. If you can't sell me before we're going to do business, if I can't trust you ahead of time, how am I going to trust you when you're actually doing the job? So they can separate themselves, so easily just by doing the basic no-brainers. Nothing. I'm not talking about anything that's anything but simple common courtesy. So that's really an important thing, accountability.
Lawrence, it's Bob Van der Valk, and we're running out of time, but I put your email address in our chat room.
Okay.
And with, the Old Guard of Summit, New Jersey, we have a certificate that will be, I presume, mailed to you. We can show this to you, and we can also mail it to you. We want to give you the Old Guard salute. We stand up and give you a big applause.
Okay, just
There's
hold
your
on.
certificate.
Hold on.
We'll leave everyone to go to this item. Thank you again, Lawrence.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me today, and I appreciate it very much.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Lawrence. That was awesome.